Welcome to the Seven Figure Leaders podcast. This podcast was created to celebrate the success stories of seven-figure business owners, giving them a platform to share their insights and lessons learned in order to inspire other business owners. As well as that, it's an opportunity to build new connections. So if you're a seven-figure business owner or someone who works with seven-figure business owners and you're looking for introductions to potential stakeholders, strategic partners and clients, I'd love to hear from you or have you on as a guest and see if I can help make those connections for you. Just go to synergycfosolutions.co. That's synergycfosolutions.co and click podcast. And there you'll find the link to apply. Today we've got Steve Lawrence, founder and managing director of Uncomplicated Group. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So best place to start, why don't you give us a bit of an overview of the Uncomplicated Group?
Sure. So I think I'll go back one before that as to where that came about, as to my background, which is that I worked for many years in corporate manufacturing for a big American company. I started as an order processor and worked my way through the company over 13 years, I think it was, to the dizzy heights of middle management. And then a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to do something different. The work I was doing towards the end was repositioning factories to be more streamlined, to be more profitable, working out where we were and weren't making our money, which products to go to market with, all that kind of good stuff. And I heard about the wave of people looking to retire in the UK, with businesses that potentially weren't necessarily ready to be sold or couldn't really be acquired easily by big groups or big corporates, and that potentially there might be an opportunity for individuals to come in and acquire these businesses. Now, a lot of these businesses don't have, say, succession, or they might not have someone in the family that wants to take the business over. So we've got a wave of folks looking to retire with factories that are maybe not big enough or not perfect enough to be acquired by a bigger entity. So I thought, well, someone like me who's been doing this for years might have a little route in to be able to do this and test out the skills I learned in corporate. So what I'm trying to do with the Uncomplicated Group is to buy a few injection molding businesses, which is my background and has been for a long time, and then set about optimizing those, streamlining operations, and working out where we can kind of, over time, of course, share resources and share, back office capacity, machinery, and things like that. And at the same time, of course, helping out some folks who have worked in their businesses for many, many years, who are looking to retire, and they're looking for the next custodian of the business rather than either being forced to shut it down or get absorbed into a huge corporate or something like that. Yeah, that's kind of the abridged summary, I guess, of what we're trying to do.
Thanks for that. So that's in a nutshell. So you basically heard about this huge wave of people, baby boomers, people aged 55 to 65, who have been running their business 20, 30 years, and they need to offload it. Or the other option, if they're not going to sell it, is to unfortunately close it down, which is obviously a situation a lot of them are going to find themselves into. So you're focusing on finding those businesses in the injection molding space, yeah?
Exactly that. Yes, exactly.
Great. And so where are you at the moment?
I've been on the sort of in the game, I guess, for about 2 years. I had a couple of knocks at the beginning. I had a couple of deals that didn't go through, but I'm on month 10 of my first acquisition. So last October, I completed the acquisition of a company based in Manchester. We're a 24-hour, 5-day-a-week operation. So we've set about kind of cleaning, modernizing, and streamlining that business over the last 10 months. That's now kind of calmed down and is in quite a nice phase of leveling out and running the way we want it to. So I'm now starting to look at acquisition number 2 and starting to try and fill my pipeline with other businesses that would complement what we're doing in Manchester.
Right. And so the journey you've been on, I guess you could break it up into, well, there's 3 parts, isn't there? There's your experience in injection molding space, and then after that, it was the process of buying a first business, and then it was the process of kind of getting in the weeds with your new business and trying to streamline things, as you just mentioned. So throughout that process, well, not the previous experience, but the buying the business and then the getting into the weeds and fixing things. What challenges have you faced that you didn't expect?
I think in the search phase, I hadn't realized that there were so many businesses that would be quite difficult to acquire. I think there's a lot of education needed in the space around what a business could be acquired, both on the buy side, because you run into these things and you agree a number with a seller, and then it gets further down the line, maybe into legals or into when funders get involved, and the deal falls apart. That did happen to me. But also, you spend a lot of time having conversations with owners who potentially have been sold the dream on a huge number. They've worked all their lives in the business. They've been sold a dream around what the business can generate in terms of their retirement fund, and they can get out of the business. But I think there's a lot of education needed there, both sides. But I see a lot of businesses where they're probably very like dependent on the owner, for example, or they haven't got documented processes, or their finance might not be in good shape. So as an acquirer, I spent a really long time at the beginning just talking to people about businesses that probably weren't even acquirable. So when you look at that from both sides, firstly, I wasted a load of time. But secondly, it's a real shame for these folks who are looking to retire, they're looking to exit, they're ready, they've spent a long time in their businesses. But the business is really hard to sell to someone else, like to pick up that entity and to have someone else in charge. If, like the owner's literally doing all of the work, for example, you can't buy that. There's no way you're going to do that. So, yeah, that was a challenge at the search phase, was trying to find something that was actually viable, having lots and lots of conversations with unviable prospects for things that we were looking to acquire. Post acquisition, challenge wise, I think it's taken a lot longer. I kind of bought the business knowing that it's a deliberate play, that the business isn't going to be squeaky clean and perfect, and it's not something that you're just going to leave and let it run. And that's really not what I wanted at all anyway. I like to get stuck in and sort of test out the skills that I learned in corporate on an acquisition. That was always the plan. But I think the baseline of where we were in terms of the financial systems, some of the controls, some of the way the operations were being run was a bit further behind than I'd expected. I was probably a bit green going in, that I came from corporate where everything was well established. There was plenty of money to throw around for stuff like software and automation in the factory. Everyone had defined roles, and I found the total opposite of that when I turned up in the Manchester factory, that we've had to kind of build a management team from the ground up. We're built our finance and our controls from the ground up. And we're now just getting to the factory side of putting in standard operating procedures, working out what our capital strategy needs to look like and all that. So I think both of these, the easy summary would be time. It takes a damn sight longer than perhaps you would realize at the beginning to get in, to find an opportunity that's viable. And even then, to get it to a point where it's running the way you want it to.
Okay. And so firstly, then let's dive into what you talked about with the search phase and actually finding a business that you actually want to acquire. So you mentioned three things that a lot of these businesses for sale, the problems that they have, which make them almost unsellable. One is dependency on the owner. One is poor finances or finance function, and then the other one was no documented processes. And depending on where you look, you can sort of get the stat that about 80-90% of businesses remain unsold.
Yeah.
Now, do you think those three reasons that you mentioned, if those 80-90% of businesses fix those three things, they would be sellable? Or do you think there are other things that are also just kind of happening in the market that mean that those businesses just remain unsellable or unsold?
I think it's hard to give a definitive answer as like every business needs these 5 steps, because everything's different. But I think those 3 are really big components. There's one which probably happens slightly before you get into the weeds of the business, which is the management of the expectation of the person looking to sell. So I see quite a lot of people getting sold a dream by brokers around, you've worked in this business 30 years, you're looking to retire, and they'll give a huge valuation on the business. And then the owner's got that number in their head, and they've already maybe spent it in their head on how they're going to be spending their retirement. But they're ignoring the fact that the business doesn't have documented processes, well-managed finance, and there's a lot of owner dependency. So I see quite a lot where you go into a business and the owner's been sold a dream of what it's worth, and it's just not really connected to reality. And it's not their fault. They've been told it by several different brokers. The broker network, I think, do a nice job of selling a huge number. They take their upfront fees for listing for the business to trying to sell it. They generate some interest at the beginning, and then I think it dies off. And then when a few potential buyers have been in and they've all seen the same thing: high owner dependency, lack of documented systems, whatever one of the menu of things it may be. And that's when the 80-90% never sell stat comes out, because it's like, is it not selling because of those things? They're fixable, but also it might not be selling because the owner's holding out for a huge number that just isn't attainable. And if they've had that from the very beginning, from their first engagement with a broker or with whoever, it's really hard for them to let go of something. So a lot of it's around education, I think, of sellers, really understanding what a sellable business looks like and what a valuation method looks like. There's no standard in the industry of this is how all businesses are valued. So there's always a degree of it being subjective. And of course, different businesses are worth different things to different people. But I think there's something there. There's a big chunk. If 80-90% are not selling and it's the same common themes, something there needs to potentially change, I'd say.
I think the general theme that I hear with when I come across businesses that are for sale is, they've been told 4 to 6 times EBITDA. You've got all sorts of adjustments in the EBITDA number anyway. And then obviously 4 to 6 times is like the financial valuation. And then when someone actually looks at the business and they find those problems that you just mentioned, for example, fully dependent on the owner, no second tier management, finances are a bit of a mess, no documented processes, and lots of more than 50% dependency on one or two clients. Yeah, then that's when the expectations get skewed, and the business owner gradually comes around to the realization that perhaps the business isn't what they thought they were going to get. And in their mind, they're like, well, the business is worth this because that's what I was told. But actually, they haven't received a single serious offer around that valuation. Then it sort of naturally has to adjust. And so, what do you think business owners can do to actually address that, and when? Because this is a pretty common theme at the moment. There's a lot of people talking about it. I've got my theory, but I'd like to hear yours.
I think the first thing would be to engage really, really early. And it's easy to say that you need to plan 3 years before you're ready, kind of thing. I think from speaking to quite a few folks looking to retire, it's almost like a switch goes off and they're like, yeah, it's time, I'm done, I'm looking to get out. So the things that I spoke about and that you just mentioned as well around, customer having an issue with one customer making up loads of the revenue or the owner dependency, all of these things are fixable, but they take time. You need a few more customers to spread your risk. It might take you a couple of years to win the customer and get a decent relationship. Same with the delegation of the owner's tasks. They can automate, or they can hire someone, or they can do whatever it takes to make themselves redundant from the process. But it takes time. So I think what owners can do is plan a lot earlier, and have almost like, I'm big on checklists because I'm a bit of a geek. So if there were a list of like, what does the ideal acquirable business look like? It's almost like there's a checklist, because the buyers have got theirs. They know the things that they're looking for. And most of the time they're the same types of criteria. So I think that would be really useful if sellers could work with either someone who's like an exit specialist or some kind of business structuring specialist to know how to make the business more acquirable. I think that's a big component of it. But also the education around how a business is valued, what a business is worth. I hear quite a lot that the owner needs a certain amount for their retirement. Now, I totally understand that. If you need X and your financial planner has said you need X to spend in your retirement, you've got no mortgage, but you want this chunk of money to do whatever it is after you finish working. But just because that's what you need for your retirement doesn't mean that's what the business is worth. If the business isn't generating cash, or the business isn't generating cash at the level to fund the retirement number that you need, your magic number, you either need to down your expectation of the number or to make changes to the business to make it worth that number. And it's not the seller's fault. They've just not really thought about it like that, because they've been in this company for 30 years, working really hard, probably built it from the ground up, working 24/7. So they think they deserve the number. And sometimes it's like, I really wish I could give you that, but it's not quite how this works, because the number needs to be indicative of the value of the business you're trying to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. And that number, I find, usually tends to be quite a round number. And it tends to be quite an attractive number that maybe people talk about at the golf club, and it sounds like the right number. And whether it's actually the amount they need or not,
Yeah.
on their retirement is almost irrelevant. It's a nice number that they become comfortable with and they think the business is worth. So yeah, it's definitely an educational process around how we can improve the number of those businesses or the percentage of those businesses that are actually sold.
What was your theory? You said you had a theory of your own.
Mine was actually pretty much in line with what you said. So yeah, my theory is kind of twofold. One is that business owners have misaligned expectations. They think the business is worth more than it actually is, or more than anyone's willing to pay. And then the second is that once a buyer finds or kind of has a look under the hood of the business and finds all these problems, and the business doesn't pass due diligence if it gets that far, they find all these other problems that reduce the value of the business, and then the deals fall through. So I pretty much agree with what you said.
I think there's a really interesting point there, which is that a lot of the bigger buyers, like the trade buyers, or you're trying to get acquired by someone in the industry, they don't really want to do the hard work of cleaning the business up. So then, like you say, that's where they either chip down the price because they want to recognize the work they need to do or the value that they see in the business, or they just pull out because there's plenty of other opportunities out there in the market. So then you need to think of a different type of buyer potentially. And that was kind of my little sweet spot I was trying to capture, which is like, I know the business isn't perfect. It needs to be at a certain level, of course, like basic compliance and things like that. But I'm willing to work in the business to be an operator for a while, to clean up some of those processes and to help the seller to exit without needing to spend 5 years, say, cleaning it up. That's my background. That's what I've been doing for a long time. So exactly what you mentioned was almost like my whole reason for doing this. It's like, I know the businesses are not perfect. There are very few people prepared or who have got the experience in the industry to do the work to get the business to where it needs to be. And when there's not many folks doing that, and it's just the corporate guys or the trade buyers, they just drop out or chip down the price, which is so far aligned from what you've told your mate in the golf club that you're going to be getting.
Yeah. So you're actually finding those businesses that are not quite perfect, but not such a mess that you don't want to go near them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of why I called my business the Uncomplicated Group, because we uncomplicate the process. I see a lot of like chaotic processes, manual processes, people running around like really, really busy but not being effective. So I thought, well, how can we uncomplicate this? Because it doesn't need to be this difficult. I understand that over time, businesses get they sort of get slowed down and they get a bit flabby with their processes and policies, and this person always does this task. It's like, okay, that doesn't mean they're the right person or it's the right way to do the process. And that's what my background is. That's what I've been doing for a long time back in corporate, was like cleaning up, streamlining, working out where you make your money. So that was the birth of the whole name of Uncomplicated Group. It was, yeah, we go in, we'll uncomplicate it.
Right. So what would you say, given what you've found since acquiring this business and finding the problems that you're now cleaning up, what would you say any business owner listening to this could start cleaning up in their own business now so that they can kind of start to reduce some of those issues, increase the valuation, and actually make it easier to run whilst they're owning the business?
I think it probably depends on who you're looking to exit to. There's a lot of sellers who haven't really thought about who their ideal buyer is. So if you're looking to sell to a trade buyer, so someone further up in the supply chain of your industry, then I think it's likely they'll pick the business up and absorb it into their operations. So they're almost certainly going to want standard operating procedures to be followed and a lot of compliance around finances, customer contracts, and things like that. So that's a really good place to start. Just make sure you're compliant across the board and make sure you've got protection, because if the trade buyer comes in, they're going to want to see that the revenue is protected and it's not all going to disappear the day after completion, or they're going to want to see that it's not that you're mates with the number one customer, and as soon as you retire, that customer is going to walk and potentially go somewhere else. So I think from that side, that's a really important thing to work on if you're thinking about the trade buyer route. If you're thinking about an individual, I would say reduce and remove yourself from the process, because as a buyer, I don't think people are jumping up and down at the prospect of buying a company to then be able to work in the business all day, processing POs or sending payments or doing real basic stuff. So if you're still doing a lot of the day to day, I can't see how an individual buyer, someone say like me or someone similar to me, are they going to buy the business, raise some money to buy it, give you the retirement that you're looking for, but then come in and spend all that money and have guarantees on their head or whatever it may be to then sit there processing orders or to sit there having to manage basic relationships with the suppliers or whatever it may be. So I think getting yourself out of the day-to-day and making it a business that's got a management team that can run, whether you're there or not. That's not to say you're not important, of course, because you still set the strategic objectives of the business. You still manage and hire and train the people that are there. So get to that level of running the business rather than the day-to-day level of payments and invoices and things like that, because otherwise it's not acquirable at all. And no one's going to give you a wad of cash to go and sit in the business as a job, because they can just go and do that for free by applying for a job somewhere else. So think about who you're trying to sell to. Is it trade? Is it an individual? And they probably have slightly different tactics for each.
That's a very good tip. And actually something that I often say to my clients, very often the clients that I work with, they want to sell their business in 3 years or 5 years. And some of them actually, maybe they don't want to sell, maybe they want to take a back seat and work 1 day a week or whatever it is. But the way that they need to build the business is fundamentally the same building blocks. It's maximize your profits and cash flow, and then reduce the risk in the business by as much as you can. And by following kind of those principles, you're going to naturally build a more valuable business that's going to be more sellable and more attractive to any potential buyer.
Yep.
So yeah, that's I think we're on the same page there. Steve, so thank you very much for coming on. For anyone who's been listening to this and kind of wants to have a chat with you, who, how do they get in touch with you, and who would you like to have a conversation with if that person might be listening?
They can get in touch with me. The best way is probably on LinkedIn, just to look me up on LinkedIn. My name's Steve Lawrence, and I think my tagline is by building a group of injection molding businesses. And I post quite frequently on LinkedIn, so hopefully my name pops up from time to time in the industry. In terms of who I'd like to speak to, it would be great to speak to people who are at the phase of considering selling, at the early phase, so we can have a chat about how that might work and how it might look, so we can demystify it a bit, because like we mentioned at the beginning of the chat, it's either it's made out to be a horrendous mystical process that no one understands, and then people don't want to do it until the last minute, until they're forced to sell. So it'd be really great to talk to people who can work out now what it is they need to do to be able to sell. That would be cool. Or if you're looking to sell right now, or you'd like to have a conversation about looking to exit, yeah, please do give me a shout, and happy to have a talk about how I've done the previous acquisition, what we're looking to do with the group, and yeah, maybe some tips about the types of things that me or other buyers might be looking for.
Perfect. So we'll put a link to your LinkedIn in the comments anyway, so anyone can get in touch with you that way. And Steve, pleasure to have you on, and good luck with your acquisitions over the next couple of years.
Cheers, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, this podcast was created to celebrate the success stories of seven-figure business owners, giving them a platform to share their insights and lessons learned in order to inspire other business owners. As well as that, it's an opportunity to build new connections. So if you're a seven-figure business owner or someone who works with seven-figure business owners and you're looking for introductions to potential stakeholders, strategic partners and clients, I'd love to hear from you or have you on as a guest and see if I can help make those connections for you. Just go to synergycfosolutions.co. That's synergycfosolutions.co and click podcast. On that page, you'll find the link to apply.